Hey gang, it's your buddy Platt. Today we're continuing on our wine series. We're also continuing to focus on dessert wines. The particular dessert wine we're going to talk about today is Icewine, I-C-E wine, or as it's known in Germany, Eiswein, E-I-S-W-E-I-N, Icewine. But we're talking about the same thing. Icewine is a type of dessert wine produced from grapes that are frozen on the vine. What happens when they're frozen on the vine is we freeze the water, but the sugars and dissolved solids aren't frozen. And when we press that frozen grape, we get a highly concentrated, high sugar, viscous liquid that comes out, but we leave most of that water in a solid form in the grape. And this is where ice wine differs from Sauterne and Tokai. Those grapes are affected with botrytis, which dehydrates the grape, and it's the fungus that helps, that dehydration that helps concentrate the sugars. Here, it's because we're freezing the water inside that grape that we concentrate that sugar, that flavor. Ice wine generally does not have botrytis. It's not to say that there might not be a few random grapes that don't have botrytis on them. If there's zero botrytis on them, it's known as clean. But for the most part, most of the grapes that go into ice wine have no botrytis. Again, it's the freezing of the water inside the grape that concentrates those sugars. How this works is you will have a normal growing cycle, and instead of harvesting in the fall, those grapes are left on the vine. And until the first real hard freeze, they are not picked. When they get a hard freeze, then it's time for harvesting. Sometimes this means leaving them out past Thanksgiving to Christmas, sometimes even into New Year's in cases of a mild winter. The grapes have to be harvested at a temperature well below freezing. Yes, at 32 degrees, water freezes, but then also ice melts at 32. So they need to be well below 32. In Canada, the law states that they need to be around 17 degrees and below. In Germany, it's 19 degrees and below. So you need a significant freeze, not just a light frost or a light freeze. You need a solid freeze. Because of this and other things, ice wine is very expensive and risky to produce. First off, because you're leaving it on the vine longer, you allow birds, other animals to pick at the grapes. You allow the possibility of rot, not just noble rot, to hit the grapes. Because ice wines have to be harvested at a specific temperature, you have to have harvest crews ready to go at a moment's notice when you hit that temperature. Now that might not seem like a big deal, but think about it. You have to grow grapes in a climate warm enough and mild enough to have that significant growing season, but you also have to be somewhere where you can get that hard enough freeze. And so that freeze is going to come late at night, early morning, and you'll have to have that crew ready to go, because once the sun comes up, things kind of heat back up, you get back into the 20s, so even though it's cold outside, it's still not cold enough for that harvest. So that crew has to be ready to go, which adds a lot of expense. Also, too, again, because we have a frozen grape, we're extracting less liquid out of each grape, which means we have to press more grapes, more expense to the winemaker. Now, that gets passed on to us consumers, but that is an expense that kind of would discourage some winemakers from producing this type of wine, because you have to produce the wine first before the consumer hopefully buys it. The first mention in history of a possible ice-style wine was in Roman times. Pliny the Elder mentioned wines, or winemakers leaving grapes on after the first frost. We don't know if he meant first freeze, how cold that was. Romans did make wines, sometimes that were raisined. Did he mean that they just left them outside after the first frost? We're not 100% sure. The style didn't really take off huge in Roman times, and afterwards was not really mentioned for hundreds of years later. It really didn't come back into known existence till around 1830 in Germany. That year they'd had a real harsh early winter freeze. A lot of the winemakers had not got out and got their harvest completed. Most of them thought, boy, we just lost this year's crop. We'll just come back next year. Most of them were going to settle just, hey, let's leave it out there, let the animals eat it, give them some food. But some went out there and decided, no, we'll give the grapes a try, just see what we got. And they found the grapes were real sweet and had intense flavor. Well, luckily for us, the Germans were already producing sweet wine, botrytis-sized wine, so they kind of knew what to do with this style of grape. And they thus produced that first vintage or that first year of Icewine. The style did not catch on, really. They only had, over the next 100 years or so, 4 or 5 more years of this Icewine. Either the winters weren't cold enough, they didn't have the crew, it just didn't work out much, and it wasn't practical in a roundabout way. If you think about how wine was made a couple 100 years ago, you had farm workers barefooted pressing grapes. Well, that didn't work very well with frozen grapes. So it was not real practical for the Germans to make ice wine. It wasn't until about 1960 when something called the pneumatic bladder press came about, and pressing those hard frozen grapes became more practical. After about 1960, starting around 61 or so, you had pretty much a steady flow of ice wine coming out of Germany. It still hadn't become huge, but they were able to produce it on a regular basis, and that kind of gave a chance for people to regularly have access to that wine. Now, nowadays, Canada is actually the largest producer of ice wine, namely the Niagara Peninsula region north of the Great Lakes. And it kind of works out. It's far enough south where, again, they can have that long enough growing season to grow grapes properly, but they're still far enough north. They're in Canada where they can still get those hard freezes. As far as the grapes used, the Germans tend to lean toward Riesling grapes. The Canadians use a grape called Vidal, V-I-D-A-L. But modern producers are starting to push the envelope with some other grapes. Cab Franc, Chardonnay, Chenin Blanc, Gewürztraminer. They're experimenting with tons of other grapes. You might see a term out there if you go to your liquor store and look for some ice wines. You might see a term out there called vin de glacier. And that is ice wine style, but it's a little different in the sense that ice wine, to use the term ice wine, especially in German, the Eiswein, E-I-S wine term, is it has to be frozen on the vine. You can't harvest it. Or vin de glacier, and some people are starting to take the grapes, harvest them regular time, and then freeze them to juice. And that's a different animal, even though probably stylistically it's close. If you're drinking 2 glasses side by side, you might not notice much of a difference. But as far as for labeling purposes, that's a big difference. Haven't seen anybody trying to do the frozen juice thing where they freeze the juice and then take out some of the ice or what have you. But that might be the next step someone tries. As far as production goes, again, Canada is the largest producer. Germany might be the most well-known, but here in the States, they're produced in the Finger Lakes region of New York, Michigan, which are both close to the Ontario Peninsula. In Europe, Austria, Denmark, Poland also produce ice wines, and even Japan. Very little bit, but there's some produced in Japan. The particular one we're going to try today is the Jackson-Trigg Vidal Ice Wine. It's a 2014. Comes in at 9.5% alcohol by volume, and the vineyard is located on the lovely shores of Lake Ontario. Let's give her a try. Oh, real quick, before I give it a try, you might notice these balls are small. Again, similar Sauterne, we're going to get about half-size bottles, but full or higher price. So this, I believe, cost me around $22, $23 for what would be a half bottle of regular wine. Oh, I got to give myself one more minute. All right, so that is a darker, deeper, golden color than your even like typical Chardonnay. Similar to Sauterne in color, even though that's probably darker than the Sauterne we tried. Oh my goodness. Get a lot of honey. Almost a mead-like quality on the nose a little bit. Let's give her a try. Wow. That is intense. And it's real sweet, real viscous, real intense. Almost a little bit like a concentrated, almost maybe a boiled down apple juice in a roundabout kind of way. That real thick, sugary apple juice your mom made to give you as a kid. More complex than that. I don't want to make it sound like you're just drinking glorified apple juice, but a definite solid punch of sweetness on the front of the tongue. That is nice. That is definitely a post-meal drink, something to sip, savor. Intense, so really nice. Well, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like the video because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them in the comment section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Till next time, bottoms up.